All right, hello everyone. Welcome to our second panel. My name is Amy. I'll be moderating this discussion with Tatiana and Vincent. They are not my parents. But yeah, with two Olympians, how cool. We're gonna have a series of questions. We'll have a series of questions, and then at the end, if time allows, we'll take some questions, and then if not, feel free to find them during the break and ask them how to become an Olympian. So first we have Tatiana. She is a fencer and a member of the U.S. national team and an Olympian, most recently competing in the Paris Olympics. And she currently studies public and international affairs at Princeton University. We also have Vincent, who is a Team USA figure skater, two-time Olympian and gold medalist, and so many other skating accomplishments to mention. He is passionate about mental health and clean sport and is currently is studying at Brown University, where he studies economics. Great, so we'll just jump into the questions. So the first question is, from your perspective, is success driven by talent, hard work, or luck? We'll start with Vincent.
Yeah, I can take this one. So, I don't really believe in talent. I think talent is a combination of a bunch of factors that people usually can't see, so they just aggregate it under the convenient umbrella of talent. I think those things include your environment, parental influences, your own innate competitiveness, your peers, what your peers are doing, and what you feel compelled to do as a result. That all sort of gets lumped into talent. For me personally, as a kid, I was super competitive. Whatever my friends were doing, I wanted to do better. Whatever people around me were doing, I wanted to do better. And as a result, I ended up, pushing myself a little bit harder on everything. Yes, I was a tryhard. I ended up pushing myself a little bit harder than maybe other people did, even on casual things. And as a result, sometimes I ended up being better at some things. People were like, "Oh, you're so talented." I'm like, no, I just tried harder. Maybe bang myself up and hurt myself a little more. But at the expense of getting the experience of trying a little harder, putting a little more effort, getting a little more return out of it, a little more experience out of it. I think it was worth it. So I believe in the value of hard work. I think that's the most important thing. I don't believe in talent. I do believe in the existence of luck, but you don't really want to, rely on luck to get where you are because it's very fickle. On the day of competition, the person who wins, and we like to say this, often is not the best skater, period. It's the best competitor on that day. You don't need to win every single day. You just need to win that one time. And obviously, there's a lot of what we would consider luck going into that. But even then, encompassed within that luck is, possibly factors affecting other people's performances that we don't know. So I think it's a little dangerous sometimes, or perhaps disingenuous, to focus too much on things like talent and luck. We always, Tatiana, you probably know, we're always told in interviews, just bring it back to talking about what you can control. I was in control of my own performance. That's all I know. That's how you answer all these political questions, or sort of gotcha questions that reporters will come at you with sometimes. It's always just you got to focus on what you can control. And for anyone really, that's just your own work that you put in.
Yeah, and definitely to build off of this notion of talent, I think it's a very dangerous thing, because I'll give an example. My little brother, he's 2 years younger than me, is also a fencer, and ever since a young age, he was very athletic, very coordinated, what people would say, "Oh, you're so talented, you're going to be great at fencing, you're so talented, you're so athletic," and he's all right. He's okay, he's pretty good, and he is very athletic, but I think especially when you get told this notion over and over again, you lose other skills like hard work and discipline. Very what you would call talented people tend to be lazy. They rely on this innate, what they were gifted with, what they were born with, and I think it completely disregards hard work and discipline. So going back to what Vincent was saying, it really is about what you can control, and what you can control is how hard you work. And then if you get lucky, you get lucky. And if you're well prepared, you'll be able to take advantage of those opportunities that are given to you.
And even referring back to the previous panel, the point about not just relying on memorizing, like, you know, calculus, but actually learning how to solve a problem. It's the same thing, right?
Yeah, there's some really valuable lessons in there. The next question is sort of talking about high achievement and how it goes hand in hand with sacrifice. So for you guys, what has the price of excellence in your respective fields been?
Yeah, I can start. I think sacrifice is very much twofold. I think one comes from our parents and one comes personally. So I'll start, I'm sure all the parents in this room know, like, if you're taking your kids to practice or whatever extracurriculars you may have, it's resources, it's expensive, it's a lot of time, and they also invest a lot of emotion in it. I'll use my mother as an example. So she couldn't come to all of my international competitions, obviously, because it's very expensive. But she would be up at 2 a.m. watching the live results, watching the live streams. And I'd be like, Mom, it's okay, you don't have to watch. Like, you'll see the results at the end of the day when you wake up. And she's like, no, I'm too stressed, I can't go to bed. So I think one aspect of the sacrifice is definitely just how much your parents pour into it. And then the second is definitely personal. I think to be good at anything, you have to give up something. So for me, like throughout high school, like you can't go to sleepovers on the weekends with your friends because you're training. Or after school, we can't get froyo because you have practice. So especially growing up, it was hard for me to kind of bite that bullet. Like, oh, all of my friends have birthday parties, why can't I go? But to be successful at anything, it just comes with a lot of personal sacrifice. Also academics, definitely. My last year was the Olympic qualification cycle, and it coincided with my freshman year of university. And all of my friends took a gap year so that they could focus fully on fencing and not academics. And I decided to stay at Princeton. I finished my first year. I got some A's. I tried my best. But yeah, like my freshman spring, I only took 2 classes for a grade. So that's definitely a sacrifice. I'm paying all this money for this education, and I'm taking 2.5 classes. So it definitely comes with a lot of sacrifice.
Yeah, that resonates completely. You covered the parental aspects, the personal sacrifice, and the academics, and that was completely true in my experience too. I mean, when I was 9 years old, my mom quit her career as a software engineer in the Silicon Valley to become a full-time skating parent. And I wasn't even good at skating then, so I don't know what she saw in me, but she saw something and she believed in me, and it worked out. So, but you know, my mom made that sacrifice all these years ago without even knowing if it was going to pay off. And you can say in hindsight, everything's obvious, right? But at the time, we didn't know, and it takes so much courage to do that. So, and it's a shot in the dark, but what matters is that you believe in something, you're passionate about something. So I would leave you guys with a takeaway here that, like, don't ever be afraid to discount yourself just because you don't know how it's going to turn out. If you wait until you know how something's going to turn out to do it, you'll always be burdened by inaction. You'll always be, when you hesitate, it's already too late. When you're crossing an intersection when the light's turning yellow, the moment you hesitate, it's over. And that's very applicable to sports too. You're about to take a big shot. You're about to, make a big move. You're about to do a quadruple jump. The moment you hesitate, it's already too late. The window of opportunity has already passed. You have to take that leap.
Great. Tatiana, you already mentioned a little bit about, trying to balance academics with being an elite athlete. So perhaps you guys could speak a little bit about combining those two worlds and then also how you're able to practice both resilience under pressure as a student.
Yeah, so I did mention this earlier. I did complete my freshman year at Princeton while also qualifying for the Olympics. And I think my main takeaway was actually that it was really helpful to have something going on. So a lot of my friends took time off and they became full-time athletes. So they're training 24/7. They wake up, they work out. In the afternoon, they're taking a private lesson with their coach, and in the evening, they're going to practice. And then they rinse and repeat every day. For me, I would wake up, attend my 2 classes, and then I would go to practice. And that acted as a really good balancing force for me, especially mentally, because then the stakes became lower. So, for example, I would come back from a really bad competition, and I wouldn't have time to sulk on it because I had an essay due tomorrow or I had a piece set due, and the other way around. If I had a big test coming up and I didn't do so well, I would like cut myself some slack, give myself some grace, because I'm also training like very heavily and often. So for me, what I ended up doing was just using what I was not doing as an outlet. I think it's really important to have outlets outside of whatever you're striving for, even if it's your main goal in life. It's what you're going for. You do need to have other things going on. I think mentally, for me at least, it was extremely helpful.
Yeah, that's very true. I took 4.5 gap years in total. I took 2 after high school and 2.5 again. It's a little bit of a complicated story, but basically a lot of sports revolve around the Olympic cycle, which is once every 4 years. So for me, figure skating, winter sport, that means 2018 and 2022 Olympics. So I graduated high school a year early in 2016, and then I took 2 gap years to focus on the 2018 Olympics. I applied to college. The deadlines were actually just before the 2018 Olympics for applications, so it was like a really hectic time. But I got the applications in with the expectation that I would, whatever schools I got an offer from, I would request a 3-year deferral, so that way I could go 2019, 2020, 2021 to 2022 seasons, just focus on skating, and then matriculate full-time. And some schools gave me 3 years, Brown gave me 2.5, but I liked Brown so much I took their offer anyway. The reason I didn't wait until 2022 to apply was because my standardized test scores were going to expire the next year, and I didn't want to have to retake my standardized test. Next year, they got rid of the standardized test requirements, so duns have. But I didn't know, so in hindsight, I would have done the same thing, right? But anyway, I took 2.5 more gap years. During that time, COVID hit, all this carp happened with my skating journey, and I was just like, I didn't have something else going on, and that made it almost easier to feel lost sometimes. It made it almost easier to feel like, to question what I was doing at times. And I definitely think that you need something else to balance, something else to look forward to, because even no matter how much you love something, if you're doing it as a full-time thing, it's going to start feeling like a burden at times. And skating is no different. And I would have loved, when skating was feeling like a drag, I would have loved to have something else going on to sort of motivate me through skating, to look forward to that. So I know a lot of you here are probably also student athletes, or musicians and students, or doing something on the side, and balancing the two can sometimes feel like a struggle. But all that matters is that you love or are really passionate about one of the two things, so that you can always have something to motivate yourself through the other thing. If you hate both of the things you're doing, it's probably time to find something else. But what matters is that you love one of them, and use that to push through.
Great, thank you so much for sharing. We're going to zoom out a little bit now into, a little bit more of a broader scope. So in your opinions, what does success mean to you, and where does ambition and fulfillment sort of meet?
I can take this one. So I'm a huge perfectionist. Ever since I was young, I needed everything to be perfect. I needed to win, needed to have perfect handwriting, needed to shade in the boxes perfectly. Wasted so much time on the SAT trying to do that. And it's a double-edged sword. Sometimes it pushes me to do more, to accomplish more, to shoot for the stars. Sometimes it just holds me back. Sometimes I get mired in the details, or just feel like nothing's ever good enough. And in that sense, ambition or perfectionism and fulfillment are almost antonyms. If nothing's ever good enough, you'll never feel fulfilled. No matter how high of a hill you climb, you always think in the back of your mind there's a voice telling you that there's a bigger mountain to climb. There's someone better than you. There's a higher place to reach. And where does it stop, right? If you only ever use the goal of like being number one as your sole motivator, you'll never feel fulfilled, because like if that's the only metric by which you measure yourself by, you're going to be a failure by that definition 99% of the time or more. And that's like, it's easy to burn out that way. It's easy to lose track of where you are in your journey. So it's super important to just goal set along the way. I'll give you an example. So in 2019, that was the semester that I did at Brown before I took another 2.5 gap years. And so I was trying to compete full-time and train full-time. The administration wasn't exactly very accommodating of my needs, unfortunately, so I ended up having to commute to Boston in rush hour traffic. So I was in the car for like almost 4 hours every day, training 5 days a week. And as a result, I could only take classes 2 days a week, and constantly going back and forth. I didn't have weekends. I had to skate Saturday, Sunday. I didn't have weekends. And it was just constantly, trying to flip the switch from study mode to, full on, elite athlete performance mode. It was impossible. I burnt out very quickly, and I actually made the decision to quit skating. At first, I withdrew from my international competitions, but then I found that I couldn't even get on the ice and feel anything inside, no motivation, nothing. And I made a decision to quit skating. During Thanksgiving break, some people who care very much about me asked me to fly out to Toronto and talk with them, meet with them. They convinced me to take on a fresh new start, move to Toronto and train there after the end of the semester and just see how it went. So they managed to convince me, and so after the end of the semester, this is December 2019, around Christmas time, I moved out to Toronto. Now, US championships, national championships, was just 2 weeks from then, in the second week of January. And now the big question was, am I going to compete? I haven't trained in months. I haven't touched the ice in months. And now I'm back. I'm back on the ice. I have 2 weeks. Am I going to compete at nationals? That's my ticket to the World Championships. And at first it was like, no, I'm not. It's not even a question. I can't even rotate a triple jump anymore. Which I guess a good analogy is like if you used to be able to write perfect cursive. Now you forget how to even write the alphabet. That's basically how bad I felt. But my new coach said, hold on, Vincent, you can't compare yourself to the standard that the level that you were skating at before. That's not realistic at all. If you want to get up there, you need to think about 1 week at a time. What are you going to do this week first? What are you going to do next week first? Before you think about, I'm going to be, in Olympic champion shape, right? So we literally broke down every single week, a very realistic goal. This is what I'm going to try and do by the end of this week, the first half of the week and the second half of the week. And I really lost myself in the process of just, taking the day-to-day small victories in. And before I knew it, nationals was here, and I actually went and won a medal after months of no training, and that to me proved the power of this incremental goal setting and learning to benchmark myself against myself incrementally instead of the big dream at the end all the time. That helped curb my perfectionism a little, and we took that approach to the World Championships 2 months later because I medaled at nationals. I earned my world team spot. Unfortunately, COVID hit before the World Championships, but just before the World Championships, I had managed to finally return to some semblance of a top level condition, and that had seemed impossible 5 weeks earlier. So in being ambitious, I would really caution against being ambitious just to be ambitious. Stop and smell the flowers along the way, literally. Take time to just appreciate what you knew today that you didn't know yesterday.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what you just said about how like the goalpost keeps moving, I will say that this is kind of a really tough question because I don't think we will ever feel fulfilled as athletes, and because we are so ambitious. I'll just like quickly say a little bit about my journey is, you know, you start at 10, 12 years old, whatever it may be, and you're like, oh, let me qualify for nationals. Great, I qualified, let's get a medal. It keeps going. Oh my gosh, I got a medal at nationals, let's travel internationally. And so by the time I was 16 or 17, I was like, okay, 16 or 17, the next goalpost is, you know what, I might be able to get recruited to college. I got recruited to college. Well, I'm on the international circuit now, maybe I can get medals. And it just keeps going. So my freshman year, I said, well, maybe I can qualify for the Olympics, and it worked. And then I retired promptly because I knew that that vicious cycle would keep going. My coaches were upset, people around me were upset. Well, Tati, why don't you try for LA? You're still gonna be so young, you might be able to get a medal. And me personally, I knew that I would get stuck because the goalpost will just keep moving. It doesn't matter how, like, what achievement you reach or how good you get, you're gonna keep wanting more, because once you reach it, you feel like the next one is feasible. So for me, just like feeling fulfilled, exactly what you said, like stop and smell the roses along the way. So after the Olympics, I took some time and thought about everything I had gained from the process. So much travel experience, life experience, discipline, and I decided that that was what I needed. Like, I got everything I could have gained out of my sport, which is why I decided to retire, and now I am studying full-time. So, yeah.
Congratulations on your retirement. For our final question, could you just briefly touch upon how Eastern and Western perspectives have sort of shaped your growth, whether that's professionally or personally, and then we'll probably have some time for a question or two from the audience.
Yeah, I can start with this one. I will say the Eastern or Asian mindset is obviously very real, and it's why so many of us are in this room today. It's because our parents, and we are so highly successful, they push us really hard. But one thing, or one downfall I will say, I find with it is this notion that progress is very linear. And it's kind of like the story you were talking about where you took a break and you actually did better. So I had a similar story. When I was 16, I broke my foot right before nationals. So for a month, I didn't train at all. And obviously one would think that you didn't do well. And I actually had the best performance of my life. It put me on the national team, and the rest is history. So I think if you were to ask your Asian parent, oh, can I take a month off before the SAT from studying? Or something along those lines. Can I take a month off before the biggest like recital of the year? They would probably say no. But I will say it was a blessing, and I think it just goes to show that progress isn't linear, obviously, and it's important to take breaks, and if you're only measuring yourself based on your achievements, it can become very daunting, because no matter how prepared you are or how well prepared you think you are, the day of the competition, as many athletes know, anything can happen. So I could be in the best shape of my life and get dead last, or I can have broken my foot and do the best I've ever done before. So I think it's important to balance these Eastern and Western perspectives in anything, not just sports.
Yeah, it's a tenuous balance between being, like, measuring yourself just by results versus appreciating the process more, which is definitely more of a Western concept. The Eastern upbringing is much more results-driven. It's much more, you know, are you, if you're not first or last type deal, you know. And I think it's a little bit dangerous to be on too far on either end of the spectrum, because if you're only smelling the roses along the way, there is no way to be along. You're just there. You're not, you know, progressing towards anything. But if you're singularly measuring yourself by whether you're first or not, like I said just now, you're going to be a failure most of the time by that metric. And it's especially dangerous in sort of from a mindset perspective, because, you know, earlier we were talking about the factors of success, like hard work, talent, and luck. Well, by an Eastern metric, sort of like a strict Eastern upbringing metric, if you did all the hard work And then some of the other factors of success, like, luck, for example, if luck wasn't on your side on the day of competition and you ended up failing, then like, and you use that failure to judge the entire body of work that you did leading up to the competition, even though you could have done the best work of your life, you could have done everything right, luck made it go wrong on the day of the competition, then that's really unproductive, that's destructive. Because, like I said, you could have done everything right. I've been extremely unlucky in this way many times. I literally got COVID the night before the individual event at the 2022 Olympics, and I had to withdraw. And I mean, that was like a decade and a half of work just crashing down right before my eyes. My childhood dreams just like ripped away from me because of something completely out of my control. And like I did everything right that season. I had the most successful season of my life. I broke 300 points. I became the only person to defeat Nathan Chen in his dominant 4-year run. I won like the Challenger Series event. That was the Olympic qualifier. I did all these things, set personal records. And then the Olympics came. I had done all this preparation correctly leading up to the Olympics, if there is such a thing as correct in training. But I did all this preparation really well, and then, and then that happened, right? And by that metric, I'm a failure. But I did everything right leading up to it. Does that mean that but I failed, doesn't mean I did everything wrong leading up to it, right? So you can't let just the result define your outlook on what you did. You have to be able to recognize what you learned along the way. That's a growth mindset. Whether you win or lose, there's always something to learn. Whether you succeed or fail, there's always something to learn. If you succeeded, it's like, okay, what did I do right? What were the factors that were working in my favor? If you didn't, if there was a failure, if there was a mistake that happened, it's like, okay, well, what's the cause of that? Try to distill the true causal effect of, X happened, thus I failed. And then you come out of everything wiser and knowing something more. That's the growth mindset. And that's something my mom's been trying to teach me about for over a decade. First heard it when I was, like 12, 13. I was like, what does that mean? Now I understand. I understand what it means. And I think that everyone here can embody it in one way or another and apply it to their daily endeavors.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you both so much for sharing about your journeys. We have like a moment or two. If there is a question from the audience, we'd be happy to take it. Yeah.
Should I just shout it?
Yeah.
Okay. In life, there's like many big changes or different steps you have to go through, and one of them must be like going from training like 30 plus hours a week to just being a full-time student. And I'm sure like training has lots of wonderful memories, your friends from sports. So I'm wondering how you go through that transition, or if any times like you really miss your time at the rink or at like the training center for fencing, and how you deal with those like memories or like those feelings where you miss it, or like how do you like go through that shift to a whole new lifestyle?
I can take this because this is very fresh. This was me at the beginning of my sophomore year, which was this past year. I completely quit the fencing team, and it was hard. Like, it was so hard. I was mentally, I don't want to say unwell, but I was very unstable for the first few weeks because such a big part of my identity was gone. And this may seem trivial, but my main thought, like flying around in my head, was, well, if I'm not a fencer, if I'm not an athlete, well, who am I? And I will say, time heals. So as I went through the semester, I joined other clubs that I didn't have like the opportunity to do before. I met so many new people, and I just like adjusted to this different life. And I will say here and there, I think about like, or I go through my camera roll and I see all the fun times I had training or traveling, and I do miss my teammates, but I still see them every day. I just have dinner with them after practice instead of attending practice. So there's little things like that keeps me connected with the people I love and like the memories I have from fencing. But I will say generally, the thing I need to remind myself is when I'm feeling sad about leaving, or like, oh, maybe should I go back? I tell myself that my brain is cherry picking the good parts. It's not reminding me about the hours and hours that I spent training and sweating and sore and all of that. So I think it's important to just remind myself that even though there's so many great things happening and that happened, it's time for me to stop. And there's so much more exciting things happening for me now, like so many more opportunities and different opportunities that I can take advantage of now that I'm not spending all my time training.
It's time to stop and smell the roses.
Yes.
Great, thank you both so much. Can we get a round of applause for Tatiana?